Okay. So
Welcome, everyone, to another special episode of Independence Podcast. Generative AI is gathering all the attention, but what it masks or hides is the fact that without proper data management, which includes data security, data access governance, any AI project that we attempt to put into production will fail. AI may be sexy, it may be getting all kinds of VC funding, but the fact is that without proper data security, we cannot go very far. So to learn what is new in this space, what's the latest and greatest, I have two of my favorite people, James Beecham. He is a co-founder and CEO of a company called ALTR, and Jonathan Sander, who was Snowflake's very first Security Field CTO and is now at Palo Alto Networks. James and Jonathan, J&J, I'm honored,
J&J.
yes, that you came. You've taken time from your busy schedule. I know, James, you're on the road, you're traveling. So thank you so much for joining this podcast. It's such a pleasure.
Happy to be here.
Thank you. Before we get started, James, I want to start with you, and then Jonathan. I only gave a very brief introduction. Can you please tell us more about your journey and give us some insights?
Sure. Yeah, I'll keep it brief. ALTR is a company that was founded to directly, address some of the security and governance concerns that myself and a few of the other co-founders had at a previous business together, where we all met in Chicago. That journey has led us to build a pure native SaaS platform to help address a number of kind of growing issues around understanding data security, data governance, data privacy, and kind of what does the future of a platform that kind of fits the data security platform definition, what does that look like for kind of this new cloud age and this hybrid age? So it's been an exciting past couple of years for us, and things are only getting better every day. So very excited, very happy to be here, and thank you very much for the time, Sanjeev.
My pleasure. Great. And Jonathan?
I guess that makes it my turn, right? Yeah, so I don't know, 28 years or something like that now, bouncing between mostly security, but sometimes data. And you mentioned Snowflake. At Snowflake, a little of both at the same time, which was a strange job. It's probably the strangest job I've ever had. Might be the strangest job I'll ever have. That said, it led me to a lot of people that I like, including James and the team at ALTR. And so, I've been helping out as best as I can there for a little while. And it's interesting. My interest in this space is really that there's a need for organizations to understand what they're doing with data. And you can throw a lot of reasons around, right? Legal, compliance, all that. But what I'm interested in is that often organizations don't know what's happening with that data, and that's actually making it hard for them to advance, right? You mentioned AI, right? You mentioned we can't go too far without good data security. I think what everyone's really scared of is that we will go too far with data security with AI. That in fact we're not going to do that, and that fear is actually keeping people from doing those projects and projects that grow out of this data and how to manage it. So I find that part of it fascinating, right? Is how do you enable organizations to do more by making sure they feel safe, right? Because they don't feel safe right now in a lot of cases. But now I'm preaching, not introducing, so I'll stop.
No, this is such a good topic. In fact, I'm curious, James, what made you start ALTR, and what makes ALTR player in the space of data security and data access?
It's born out of pain, and so I'll go a little bit more into detail from the introduction. So Christopher Strutman, who's the other technical founder with the company, and I met in Chicago, and we were working on some really tough challenges around data and low latency data systems, and being able to advance the data practice within a business. This was just right around the time that AWS was coming out, and so applications were beginning to be lifted and shifted, up into the cloud. And what we started seeing was, as soon as those apps got to the cloud, and they became serverless, or they kind of had that elastic nature, now all of a sudden that on-prem database that we were all connecting to through some IPsec tunnel or whatever, was now becoming the bottleneck. And so we started seeing data begin to move up, into these cloud processes, and realizing that, as bad as a idea of taking a large Java application and just lifting and shifting it up to an EC2 instance, for example, as bad of an idea as that was, taking our database firewall and our database activity monitor and our key management appliance and our intrusion detection system, which was all living in our racks, and trying to run these virtualized, instances of them and do the networking together through proxies and, all that work, turned out to also be a bad idea. And so we started thinking about, how would we approach, if we had a clean slate, how would we approach the governance and security of this data as it moves up into that cloud? And so there were kind of a couple of things that became clear to us. The first one was, we needed to match the scale and the elasticity of these deployment mechanisms. And so we've been an AWS customer from day one of the ALTR platform. Doesn't mean it was easy at first, Sanjeev. When we told banks and insurance companies that we were going to govern and secure their data from a SaaS platform, they kind of said, "Are you sure about that?" But fast forward to today, we get to win awards for that same decision. So boy, don't we look smart! But it was a tough go to kind of have that initial bite at the SaaS apple right away. Another challenge that we had was, when everything was an appliance, it was kind of all network based. And so we had a number of use cases where maybe a database driver would be a better place to instrument some of these controls and these protections. Sometimes APIs are great and fine to be called from a Lambda as part of a data pipeline using Glue or S3, something like that. So we wanted to have multiple integration methods as well. And I think lastly, one of the big things for us too was, we had tons of problems to solve at the previous business. And as most of our customers feel, governance, security, and privacy, while it's required, is not the sexiest and coolest thing in the world. And so we kept looking for ways to offload these tasks onto other teams that maybe weren't as critical to the daily operations of the business, or maybe had a larger interest in kind of its outcome. And so making an easier to use platform that did not require everything to be done with YAML and JSON objects, getting out of the way of the network engineers, and being able to build a tool that a governance professional or a privacy professional could use and interact in there. So combination of kind of all those different pieces led to us building this platform now that we're very proud of, and helping customers move data from on-prem to the cloud, but also continue to work in those hybrid environments with those multiple integration methods like the drivers and the network proxies and the APIs in there. So it's been a fun 5 or 6 years. We've certainly learned a lot, but right now I think the decisions that we've made in the past have led to a very consumable solution for a lot of different businesses.
James, I want to dig deeper into data security and governance, but before I go there, I want to ask Jonathan if you can educate us on what was Snowflake's journey into data security and governance space. Because if I remember when Snowflake first came out, it did not have some of the native capabilities which were added later on. So if you can.
Well, so it's interesting, right? So security was in a large part built in from the very first moment, right? But there is a distinction between security and governance.
Yes.
And I think it would be fair to say that governance wasn't, right? Security was, right? There was encryption from the beginning. And, it's funny, much like ALTR's journey, Snowflake tried to start from a clean slate. But luckily, unlike a lot of data people, they didn't put security on the floor and forget to pick it back up. So they actually, they put security into that clean slate as well. And so it's always operated extremely securely. I think what you're talking about is they did add governance features over a time, but the philosophy at Snowflake has been, and I don't work there anymore, so I can't speak on their behalf. But having done that for a while, I can tell you that the philosophy had always been build in the basic feature, the capability, the enforcement point, if you want to get technical about it. But they don't really build the policy points. They don't build the integrations even in a lot of cases, right? They do leave that as an exercise to the market. And, a lot of gigantic customers try to take that on by themselves. Good luck. But most customers, obviously, of ALTRs and other similar solutions have found that basically the real idea is that even Snowflake's like, okay, we know we're going to be like an Oracle. We're going to have other people picking up that slack. And so, you find that like there's masking policies in Snowflake, but a customer is often found at a loss where they're trying to scale out the idea of building those on their own, right? And so, it's interesting. The journey has been to add all these things, but in the Snowflake way, right? Put the power there, but then put the use of that power in the hands of the customer, right?
And
Or the customer's partners and vendors.
I think one thing to add on there, I think Jonathan's correct. And what we've also seen is that there are certain types of customers, speaking about just Snowflake in particular, there are certain types of customers that do still want to have a little bit of separation of duty. So they'd like to have
That's a fair point
Snowflake,
too. Yeah.
yeah, they'd like to have Snowflake have a lot of control and a lot of functionality around security, but then also be able to have some level of check and balance. And so I think Snowflake in particular has done a really good job of kind of, as Jonathan was mentioning, those governance features and those extensibility features. Like external tokenization is one that I'm thinking about just on the top of my head. Being able to use a Vault solution for tokenization that works seamlessly with that product, I think has been a major accomplishment of Snowflake, and we're starting to see the other platforms begin to kind of mimic those actions because of their adoption and how widely used they are.
That's really great to hear. So you talked about tokenization, James, and then Jonathan had talked about encryption. We also have concepts of ABAC, attribute-based access control, policy-based access control. So James, if I were to just dial back for a second, how do you distinguish between data security and data governance?
I think it probably has to center around the usage of the data. And what I mean by that is, from what I've experienced and what we've been doing here at ALTR, data security, to me and to us is really focused around the kind of 4 or 5 core topics that protect data when it's not being used in an authorized manner. Those core topics are things like encryption, database activity monitoring, encryption at rest, excuse me, database activity monitoring, data loss prevention, privileged access management, all of the things that have to do with securing data as it's either sitting at rest or securing it from any kind of unauthorized access or unauthorized use. I think one thing that has changed a lot in the past kind of 5 to 10 years is the way in which data is being accessed. And I think this is where data governance begins to kind of show up and differentiate from data security. I'm thinking back to our own practices 10 years ago. Almost no users directly access data in the database. It was almost always through an application, where that application was a very light kind of BI tool, or it was some homegrown app that did internal bookkeeping or internal practices. But that application would have a single service account. It would talk to the database, and then it was the application's responsibility to delineate how users could see data and which users could access data in which formats. I think if you fast forward to today, with the rise of BI, the rise of data science, machine learning, there are more and more individual or direct users having valid reasons to access data directly out of a database. I think that's where data governance begins to kind of blend into the world of data security. Now, there's obviously lineage and quality and availability aspects to data governance that I'm not speaking about. But broadly speaking, I think the increase in direct access to data has brought data governance a little bit into the data security world, helping to make sure that if you're the right role, you have the right business reason to be accessing data, and in different ways in which privacy has to be met there too. So I think those are kind of 2 broad distinctions that you can make about data security and data governance. Jonathan, what I saw you shaking your head or kind of wondering what you
Well,
think.
so I guess in my mind, in a very broad sense, I've always thought security is about stopping bad things from happening, and governance is about letting good things happen.
Yep, I agree.
Broadly, right?
Yep.
And I was just kind of in my head as you were giving sort of the examples. I was trying to say, do we agree? Like, are they mapping? And your statement about governance has come a little bit into the area of security is interesting to me, because what I think you look at, right, masking again is a great example, or tokenization is a great example. It is, in a sense, about letting a good thing happen. The reason people do tokenization of the data is so that the data can be used in more contexts, right?
Yep.
And that's why it's good. That's good to call it a governance thing. But what's, I think, more interesting, what's happened now is that where governance used to just be a plan, right? The governance people would just sort of make policies and hand off paper to security professionals and say, figure out how to make this true, right? Now there are actual technical features that are themselves governance, right? Which is, I'd say, 5, 6 years that's been the case, right? For in a real way, in a broad way, right? So, but anyway, yeah, I was trying to like map your specifics to my generalizations.
It reminds me of we have a mutual friend, and you'll know who I'm speaking about, who spent some time at one of the large data protection companies, and he said, one of the things that frustrated him the most about having to deal with customers with that particular product was how many times a data protection tool like an encryption or a tokenization tool had to be kind of bastardized, for lack of a better word, into an access control solution as well.
Right.
So I think, Jonathan, I think that the security guys, our team got the written document that said these users can access this data in this way, and these users can access it in this way, and all they had was their data protection tool, and so they kind of tried to make it work. And I think that's where I 100% agree with you, that kind of governance is beginning to allow those authorized uses. And I think there's particular techniques that are better than trying to try to overuse some of these, tokenization or encryption tools for access control.
Absolutely agree.
So how should we think about a modern data security? It used to be, from what I'm hearing in the past, it was all monolithic. It was just one code and everything was in it. But then with cloud, we separated compute and store. So now you've got your data security, and then you've got various types of compute. So various analytical engines and different personas using different tools. Should we think of security as its own plane? So should it be like data, applications, and security, which is sort of independent of the tool that you use, but makes sure that the security is applied consistently?
I can start there. I think back to how simple it was when data-centric security was the topic that we were following and working against. And Sanjeev, to your point, everything was in one place. And I could put my application level encryption on top of that data so that my privileged users couldn't see it. And then as that data flowed to the application, the decryption, detokenization would happen, and my data was secure all the way through with TLS and all of that now. And I think that world, unfortunately, was very simple, and we have severely complicated it for good reasons, because we can now, to your point about separating compute and storage, and having those places which higher levels of compute can occur. And I think that now what customers are asking us for, and what we're seeing in the market, is a more kind of generic or holistic solution, that is maybe more platform based, to your point. And I think some of the characteristics of those desires are interoperability with many different systems. And that to me just screams APIs and integrations. And then you start thinking about, well, how are you going to make that happen if you've got a single instance of a data security tool living in a VPC somewhere? The networking for that's going to be very difficult. And that's one of the major reasons why ALTR is a global SaaS platform, so that you can access these controls and these policies and these permissions from anywhere, really. There's really nothing that prevents you from reaching out to and talking to ALTR as we operate our global footprint here. I think that's been a major benefit for customers. Now, one challenge that's put on a platform like ours is it's kind of pushing us to go from best of breed, meaning getting very deep into each of these data systems, to getting maybe a little bit more wider. So being able to follow that data from a source ingest into an S3 bucket, into a lake, into a warehouse, but then that data is going to get pulled into Salesforce or Sigma or some other SaaS tool. And so I think it's going to be important for data security platforms to not fall back into the ways of the CASBs, and try to intercept all this data movement and try to break application flows and processes. I think it's going to be a combination of that data-centric security, which put the security on the data, but then have that data-centric security be interoperable among all the different areas. Hopefully that makes sense, in there. But I think that's what you're going to see is the new definition of these platforms, is being able to go as deep as you can in as many places as possible.
Jonathan?
Yeah, I was going to say, so it's interesting, right? In the Snowflake world, there were a lot of customers, there still are a lot of customers who probably never mess around with any of this stuff, right? A lot of firms who use Snowflake's giant analytical and other capabilities with data that essentially doesn't require a lot of the protection that we're talking about. And they rely on the built-in security that Snowflake has. Why do I say all that? You asked, Sanjeev, should security be another plane, right? So I think it depends on your requirements. I think it depends on the organization and the information and what you're trying to achieve and what you're achieving it with to some degree. If you're some market analysis firm who's just bought public data and you're just doing novel things with it, your IP is in what you've done with it, not the data itself.
Not the data
right?
itself.
So like you don't need to worry about a lot of the things that we're talking about right now. And there's a lot of companies that are like that, right? So the minute you start thinking though about, oh, well, maybe I'm a healthcare provider, maybe I'm a financial, right? Well, instantly now you've got some kind of PII, you've got some sort of sensitive information. Now, that doesn't stop you from using the inherent security of your platform, Snowflake and others, but now your demands are higher, right? If you stick to Snowflake, you got to turn on all these policies and controls. You've got to administer all of those policies and controls. You've got to do what's necessary to get the higher level of responsibility you have to be delivered by the power that it can give you. In this case, the inverse of great power and great responsibility. It's great responsibility that requires great power in that case.
Requires great power.
But the notion, though, and I think, James, when he saw that, like, ALTR had to get broader, I think you can actually make that generic. Every customer who's doing something with data at the levels we're talking about has multiple systems through which the data will flow. Even if they're exclusively Snowflake or exclusively something else, well, they got to get the data there somewhere, or they got to use the data somehow. So they're going to have other systems that are impacted, which then asks the question that, beleaguers IT forever: consistency, right? How do I have a policy about what this data is supposed to be used for, by whom it can be used, and all the other questions you would ask? How do I make that policy consistent across all these places? And that's when security definitely becomes, and governance for that matter, becomes its own plane, right? When you have to govern and secure across all of that. Now, that doesn't mean there's not security built into each little part. And in a large enough organization, that doesn't mean there wouldn't even be security members of each individual team, and also complemented by a larger edifice above that. But I think the use cases, the data, and all of that, and to some degree, scale will drive if security is a different plane.
I think just to incredibly emphasize the point that Jonathan made about the platforms themselves providing native capabilities, both in that previous answer and earlier. I don't believe, after having worked on this problem now for a number of years, that a single company can do all of this on their own.
No.
I think that the use cases per data store and per application are so specific to those data stores and those applications, which is why they exist, and they're not just being used, in generic ways with other platforms. it's going to be required that the platforms themselves provide these capabilities, and then tools like Alter or others are here to supplement those wherever they need to be supplemented, but more importantly, help configure those platforms. I think one of the biggest challenges that I have seen as more and more data has gone to the cloud and kind of hybrid has become the new normal, is trying to match the scale and size of a Snowflake, of a Databricks, of a BigQuery, of a Redshift, of any of these RDS clusters that are out there. You yourself are going to have to become, as a data security provider, the size of those platforms, and that's not something that's going to be achievable anytime soon. So I think it's very important that we emphasize these integrations with these platforms. I think that's how this kind of becomes ubiquitous across the world here.
This is really good. Now I see why Jonathan's LinkedIn profile says philosopher turned technologist.
Yeah.
Now it makes sense. So sticking to this,
Actually, Sanjeev, it's just that my degree doesn't look that silly. I like to just like get it right out there. Like, yes, I have a silly degree. Let's get over it. Let's move on and then talk. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So, James, you talked about, the enormity of these cloud deployments now. In the scenario we currently live in, with massive scale that's needed, and we've gone global. It used to be that, we were 9 to 5, so we could shut it down, the
Yep.
system at night, but now we got users coming from all over the world all the time. How should we think about designing a modern data security? What are some of the building blocks or the design philosophies that should go into modern data security?
I think you've hit all the kind of the important topics, and I like to look at places where this has been solved before and try to learn from that. And so one place to look at, before this global adoption of data and this 24/7 querying and all this scale and in the cloud could have been accomplished, the data had to first get up into those areas. And so I look a lot at kind of the ETL or the ELT world for kind of lessons on how they dealt with scale and kind of how they dealt with this kind of growing demand. And when you look at the tools that are out there from the ELT providers or the ETL providers, I think very similar to data security, where there's a lot of native capabilities to read data into a platform or leverage your hyperscalers infrastructure. So then you ask yourself, what are the ETL providers solving for? I think they're solving for documentation, for scale, for error, for retry. And it's a very simple question. Once you get these massive data pipelines going, and you start having tens of thousands of end users consuming data every day, and then your boss comes in, your auditor comes in and says, show me where you're following these written policies around how data should be accessed. If you go pull up your nasty Python script that's in some third level branch, in your private GitLab, and start pointing to all the structs that you made about how this represents a user model, and then they inherit these requirements, and so it's this array list of what data types are allowed to access, you're going to be sitting there for a long time trying to prove that you're following those access policies correctly. And so I think I learned from watching the ETL providers provide a very clear interface of, here's where the data is starting, here's where the data is going, here's the transforms that are happening with that. I can point on the screen, I can use purpose-built reports. And so from a documentation and a scale perspective, it makes it really easy to prove what it is that you're doing and why you're doing it. And it makes it easy to change and to have new team members come in and out and kind of help you with those pieces in there. And I think the other piece that's really critical is error handling and retries. As more and more machines are talking to each other, more and more things are happening as DevOps practices are taking over. I have suffered from this myself. My own Python and JavaScript scripts don't account for every return code or for every error. I don't have all the good back-off logic in there, right? That's where customers are realizing that platforms like what Alter has, for example, can kind of handle those items for them. So I hope that analogy makes sense, Sanjeev, about kind of where this needs to go and kind of why it's going this way. Is I really think that parallel with ETLs is kind of where the data security platforms are right now. We're at that point where we have to start managing the scale. I don't think customers realize, to Jonathan's point, how much of a software development lifecycle you're taking on by just managing RBAC and masking on your own. Those are just two, of the core concepts. It can become an entire process in and of itself.
I like the way you explain, both of you have explained things with analogy and simplification. I was actually going to continue asking you about how customers can calculate ROI from using a product like ALTR or others. But before I even go there, for the data people who are watching this, you mentioned RBAC, you mentioned CASB before that. Encryption and format preserving encryption. It'll be great if you can explain what is the difference between these different concepts.
Yeah, I'll start, or Jonathan, please.
Well, I was going to say, I don't know. I don't know if CASB really it fits in the list. I think he was using earlier. James was using CASB as a cautionary example.
It was a cautionary example
not something that you should go in. So the cloud access security broker, right? CASB. It's a gateway style solution, and it's the oldest story in security, right? Want to make it secure? Put a guard at the door. Yep. And the guard will figure out what to do. And obviously that's a massive oversimplification, but CASB is typically between end users and user applications. It gets super interesting when you have something like Snowflake or other platforms where end users do in fact directly touch the data, to James's point earlier. So we definitely saw people trying to put CASBs in front of Snowflake. This seldom worked well. Right? This is seldom a good idea, right? But yeah, so I'll take one of those definitions: format preserving encryption, FPE. That is one that's good for data people to understand, and it's all right there in the name. But think of it this way, right? So there's a lot of terms that are used synonymously in this, right? So format preserving encryption, FPE, essentially just refers to, I am going to encrypt some piece of data, and that is going to be usable in the format that data was originally supposed to be in. For example, I have a phone number in my UI, but I don't want to show the real phone number to James because he's not authorized. So he's going to get an encrypted version of it, but I'm going to preserve the format of that so I don't have to actually redo my whole application to handle some string of hot garbage characters where it's expecting a phone number to be, right? Now, often this is also called tokenization, right? Because what I've done is I've built a token that I can use, right? These are pretty interchangeable, right? You'll often hear people also use the word masking here, but typically masking, and this is a very key point, is destructive, meaning that what comes out of the masking is just stars or zeros if it's trying to be format preserving, right? You can't use it with tokens and format preserving encryption capabilities. Typically, the use of the data is not destroyed. A great example there is often you'll see people tokenize something like a credit card number, and they can use the credit card number then to join in queries because the tokenized version, the format preserving encryption version, is still consistent, right? Meaning if I find it in 6 places, I will have the same token in those 6 places, which means I can still join across those 6 places, right? So not only does the format matter, like a phone number in an application, but also the consistency of that data across all those different places.
It turns out that the referential integrity that Jonathan is speaking about is one of the biggest challenges with, in particular, at-rest protection of data, whether that be format preserving encryption or tokenization. Because if you do not deterministically create those reference values, then a lot of the value of the data sets are diminished. But if you improperly create those same tokens, meaning I map the same credit card number to the same encrypted or tokenized value, then you've actually reduced the security of that data. So it's a very challenging world. And then at the same time, Sanjeev, everyone's demanding, why is it not running faster? So you've got these business problems that are just kind of sitting around there. To kind of talk a couple of more points, I think one thing for folks to understand about the difference between FPE and tokenization, because there can be interchangeable, aspects to that. You can really think of tokenization as being a little bit more like a coat check, meaning I'm going to give you a piece of sensitive information. You're going to give me a ticket back. You no longer hold your jacket. I'm holding your jacket. So somebody takes this ticket and looks at it. They can't tell that I'm a size medium, which I still am, and that it's a black jacket and it's from JCPenney or whatever, right? All I have is just a reference to my jacket. Different from an encrypted value, where technically that plain text value still resides within that. This is where it gets confusing. Token that comes out of the FPE process, meaning if I looked at this long enough and hard enough and I took a couple of good guesses and Jeff Bezos let me use AWS for free for 2 years, I might be able to determine that James lied. It's actually a large jacket, and that it's not from JCPenney. I got it from Goodwill.
It's from
Burberry. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's Burberry. So there's a distinction between tokenization and preserving encryption, in which the result that comes out of it, the token that comes out of it, may or may not retain any information about the underlying data set. And there's a lot of work on PCI workloads that kind of require tokenization versus encryption in certain areas. But that's just one thing. Just to kind of rattle off a couple of the other ones for some of the folks in there, I think as it relates to databases in particular, you've got kind of 3 key things to focus on. You gotta hit your at-rest protection. Right, we've just beaten that to death with the FPE and tokenization. That's to help make sure that if somebody gets unauthorized access to your underlying data store, that what they take or what they can steal is obfuscated in a way that essentially makes you too difficult of a target to go after, and they're going to go look for somebody else that maybe does not have encryption in their database. I think
that's interesting as well. When you talk about at-rest and protection, that's another example where it would be nearly impossible to do that at the deepest levels for all of the built-in platforms. They have to supply that, right? Because there's actually at-rest encryption in multiple layers, right? Yes. And that actually gets confusing for a lot of practitioners, because something in Snowflake's documentation says, well, it's already encrypted at rest. Aren't I okay? But that encryption's about the disk and protecting you from the provider, correct, not about the information that's in the file on the disk and protecting the information from users, be they authorized or not, potentially. Right? So, there's multiple layers of at-rest encryption, and if you want to meet PCI, for example, as James mentioned, you have to do them all. Sorry, James. I just wanted to
it's a good point. We always talk about security in layers, and even within those layers, there's security of layers. So I think the at-rest piece is the first of the 3. The next 2 start thinking about contemplating access, right? So you've got as long as I've been alive, and probably as long as I will be alive, there will be some type of privileged access to the data. Privileged access just simply means an administrator, somebody that's allowed to log into the database and do actions for the business, valid business reasons, right? Setting up indexes, working on scale for compute, having to deal with access patterns, things like that. Typically, those users are not authorized to see the sensitive information. And so you've got this concept of a privileged access management system, and that can range from providing temporary logins to your admins that then watch all the commands that they run and send them off to a central security organization. So you can say, hey, as the admin, I needed to come in and put an index on this one column because our developers are now querying it. We're seeing lower performance. So this is what I did to do that. But then there's also the privileged access management from a credential theft perspective, that these people that have root level access to databases or admin level access to databases, they're very big targets for the phishing folks. So that's the second kind of concept after at-rest protection, is how do I control the access to those privileged management users. And I think the third piece that kind of rounds all this off from an access perspective is when you do provide valid access out via an application or via an open port, and you are going to decrypt or detokenize that value, how do you make sure that from an intrusion perspective or a SQL injection perspective or a credentialed access threat perspective that you're monitoring the valid use of that sensitive data? And that's where, you know, those third sets, those intrusion detections, and those kind of data in motion solutions come into play. So hopefully that, Sanjeev, helps, you know, the audience think about this. There's more layers to it, but I think those three,
So many more layers.
yeah, the at-rest protection, the privilege, and then the usage are important.
In fact, we don't even have time to talk about all the layers, because there's also this thing when you start using the data and it's sitting in the memory. So that's a whole space by itself. So without going there, let's talk about rollback, attribute-based access control, and now policy-based access control. So how do these play out these days?
Jonathan, you wanna start? Happy to fill in.
Sure. I mean, ABAC's the classic, right? Role-based access control. And what's interesting, you meant, you know, we've evoked the ideas of hybrid and workforce changes and, you know, people doing things they never did before, you know, going direct to the data and all that. It used to be that an organization had a pretty rigid structure, and role-based access control reflects that in a lot of ways, where essentially I can say that there's this many people who have an analyst role in this part of my organization, in the accounting department. So I could reflect that in a technical sense in some role, often powered by something like an Active Directory group or something like that, right? So the technical implementation has been done many different ways over the years, obviously. You know, Snowflake itself has its own roles, as does every other system we've mentioned. But the idea was supposed to be that, you know, I could pretty easily say that people who had this role would do these things. And then I would assign that role to those people's accounts, users, and I'd be done. Cool. That's great. Like, oh, that's awesome. The fact is that, you know, that's not as simple as most organizations are today. At the best, role-based access control these days is typically the floor of someone's access, right? This is like, you know, everyone can have access to this, right? Everyone can have access to that. Everyone in this department gets access to this. Those are great candidates for roles, right? You also mentioned policy-based access control. Policy-based access control is largely a reaction to the changing organizational structures that then drive changes to access control requirements, where ABAC is just not sufficient to meet all of those. Policies allow you to essentially make statements, right? And say, well, Sanjeev is in this department and he has this job function, but because he's part of a cross-functional team that is doing a project that touches this other stuff, if he is doing this thing with this account on this system, he can access this data, whereas he might not be able to access that data in some other circumstance. And, you know, once you say that, I mean, basically you're making a directive statement. It's a policy, right? And being able to encode the policy directly into the system is what policy-based access control is really all about. You also mentioned earlier, since it's part of the triumvirate here, I'll cover too, ABAC, attribute-based access control. Interestingly, I find that attribute-based access control and policy-based access control, in the practical sense, are mostly synonyms, right? You can make distinctions. Like, you can definitely make distinctions, and there's definitely people I know who would be personally angered with me for saying that. But in a practical sense, they're very much, because the focus just becomes different, where the policy-based access control is about the directive statement, right? Whereas the attribute-based access control focuses more on the attributes that would fill in the blanks of that statement. You could take that directive and make it fill of blanks, right? Somebody who is X doing Y under conditions A, B, and C are allowed to do these things. Well, the attribute-based access control is very worried about the source management and presentation of X, Y, A, B, C in that statement, right? So it's kind of a matter of focus in that sense.
That is really good to hear. I'm very interested in hearing, how does ALTR define policies, and then how does Snowflake enforce policies?
It's a good way to continue. I think the one joke that we've been kind of making is, ABAC is very quickly moving to the next letter in the alphabet just behind it. SBAC, static-based access control. To Jonathan's point, it's the kind of the bare bones, the basics. And if you think back to what we were talking about 30 minutes ago around this global adoption of data and projects moving all the time and third parties and everything else, the access to data has become so dynamic that a system like ALTR is built in a way to handle this. And I'll give you a very clear example. Whenever ALTR is doing something around deciding how a user should have access to data, if you go look at the enforcement points where ALTR is in, whether we're a database driver, a network proxy, natively integrated to a platform like Snowflake, you'll see that all of the integration methods where ALTR lives are all responses to dynamic processes. So unlike a static access control system, or even a policy-based one, which would say in the enforcement mechanism, if role is this and it's this day and it's from this IP address, then allow access to data. That would be codified into the masking policy, into the JDBC driver, something like that. The way that ALTR approaches this is to have a dynamic engine process all of the attributes, all of the context, and all of the current rules from the business, and decide in a real-time nature how this user should be allowed to see this data. Now, when I say it that way, I get two immediate reactions. The first is from the people that have been managing complex roles and hierarchies and structures say, thank you so much for doing something that does not create 800-line long masking policies or 800-line static access policies that have to be maintained and changed and tested and promoted. Thank you, ALTR, thank you. The other half say, you mean to tell me that you're going to make a dynamic decision every time before I'm allowed to access data? And my answer to you is yes, it's exactly what I'm telling you, because I can do that. In sub 10, 15 millisecond time frame, of which it takes you longer for the color red to render in Power BI on your pie chart. I can decide in a highly available, fault-tolerant global SaaS platform how your users should be allowed to access data. And then I can return that back to the system, the enforcement point, to then allow that data to flow. So I think that's one big differentiator from ALTR versus some of the other platforms that you might see out there is because we had that SaaS platform delivery mechanism, and because we understood, to Jonathan's point, kind of the nature of attribute-based and policy-based kind of being where the world is going, we wanted to be able to have a system that could adapt and react to that, and that's what we built today. And it allows, I think, for a couple of things, customers can make changes very, very quickly and frequently, and they can be reflected on a per query basis, because every query is getting processed every time it's executed. If you change an access policy in between my queries running, there is no cache time, there is no propagate time. That change is reflected right away. So I think that's one big benefit. And I think the second major benefit is as the capabilities of the native platforms increases, the role hierarchies and structures are only getting more complicated. We're now seeing users have database roles which inherit functional roles, which have permissions applied to those functional roles. And so as those structures get more and more complicated, you need special compute that's able to resolve those and understand those in a real-time nature, and not have that block or be run inside of an enforcement point that maybe is very good at manipulating data, but not good at running sequential logic to understand and break down structures and users. So, we get two reactions to being this dynamic policy nature. At the end of the day, both sides end up thanking us. But I hope that makes sense, Sanjeev, or at least gives you an idea of kind of how ALTR goes about this.
Very, very interesting. So we have only a few minutes left, and I have so many more questions. One of them is that We are recording this in February 2024. Last month, Gartner came out with its market guide for data security platforms, DSP. What is a DSP? Congratulations, I saw ALTR is included in that document. What is a DSP?
Go for it, James.
Did we, James?
Oh, he might be frozen. That's kind of hilarious.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll take a shot at it since he's frozen. DSP, like many of these Gartner categories, essentially is a roll-up of lots of things that already existed, right? Data discovery, policy definition, policy enforcement, and essentially what they're trying to do is make the statement that there is a new space for something that provides all of those capabilities from one platform, and allows you to understand what you're doing across many silos, right? So like we've talked about a couple of different places here, how can you make sure that you're consistent? How can you have that consistency in enforcement? That's what the data security platform is supposed to be for your data layer, for your data plane.
So James, welcome back. We lost you for.
Thank you very much. I love Marriott. I will always be a Marriott customer, but gosh dang it, Marriott. I caught the tail end of Jonathan's answer, and
we were just defining DSP.
Yeah, and I think what you said matches kind of my understanding and what we're marking towards, and that is, I mentioned when ALTR was first forming, we had at a previous business, we had our database firewall was different from our key management appliance, was different from our intrusion detection system, was different from our classification system, and all of them had to be kind of integrated and work in an interoperative way. The data security platform is the definition of the consolidation of. Make sure we define that a data security platform also addresses the at-rest protection as well as the in-use as well as the access portions of it. And so I'm very excited to be a part of the category. I spent a lot of time with Jorg and Andrew and a number of the other folks there at Gartner, and so we're excited to be a part of this category.
Jorg Frisch, by the way, is one of the best Gartner analysts. He's amazing. So and so are others too, but he's the one was directly part.
Careful playing favorites.
I will make sure
we're on the same team.
Yeah, I will make sure he sees this.
That's great. So we only have a few minutes left. I am super keen to hear what are your super secret powers, like what are your things about you that the world doesn't know in general. So
so I know I have to drop off first here, so I'll simply state this. I'm very bad at keeping secrets about myself. Anyone who's ever met me probably knows more about me than that my wife is comfortable with. That's for sure. But yeah, I mean, you can probably tell by the background, right? I'm a comic book addict. I was out in San Francisco this weekend for visiting friends. I bought so many comics that I actually filled my carry-on, and I had to figure out how to get the dirty laundry home some other way.
Just wear it.
So,
just wear it.
I almost pulled the Joey, just like layer it all on there, I figured out something else.
How many comics do you own now?
I can only, so I haven't put the stuff I bought this trip into the app yet, but my app says my collection is 6,536 books. That doesn't include trades and zines. Wow. So it's probably a better estimate to say 7,000 altogether.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah. I always tell people that my desk is in my comic book room. My comics are in my office, right? It's a flipped relationship.
Go to Comic-Con. Is Comic-Con?
Oh yeah. Yes, I definitely have. So I'm going to drop before James tells his secret, which means I will definitely tune in to hear James's secret later.
All right.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jonathan.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. I can answer this, Sanjeev, in maybe kind of a fun way that continues Jonathan. So I learned about Jonathan's comic book obsession. Let's just call it what it is, Jonathan. You can yell at me later. Through sharing meals with him, and so for me, food is something that I'm very passionate about. However, I'm cursed with this engineering brain, and it always causes me to think about process, and to think about efficiencies and timing and third and fourth level details. And when I was growing up, my parents worked full time at IBM, and so during the summertime, we had to fill our summer calendar up with camps and things. We couldn't just sit at home because there was nobody there to watch us. And so I did all of the sports camps. I did all of the basketball, baseball, football, tennis. Then when I ran out of those, I would do the horseback riding camps and do the archery camps and all that stuff. And then when I ran out of those, I found cooking. And I really enjoyed the process and the details that go into preparing food. And this was before I knew about the Michelin star stuff and kind of all that, and before all the TV shows came out that glorified the cooking contest and yes chef, kind of stuff. If I wanted this piece of meat to be warm and cooked perfectly at the same time that my polenta was going to be ready, and I wanted to make sure that the greens didn't wilt on the warm plate, you had to really think about exactly how am I going to do this? When do I start other things? When do I turn heat up? When do I turn heat down? And so I think a lot of this outside of data security passion that I have stems from still the engineering mind that I have, but I really enjoy applying it to cooking. And probably my favorite thing is when I get some friends to come over and I prepare something, and maybe they're just blowing smoke, but they say this is the best X I've ever had. I'm really excited to be able to share that with my friends. So that's my answer.
So James is fascinating because one of my daughters was applying for college many years ago. As a good dad, I tried to help her with a college essay, and she told me, "Back off! I'm going to write my own essay." And on cooking and the concentration with which she does precision chopping and how it helps her organize her thoughts and her life, and it got her into her college of choice, so that's great. James,
really good.
I came to this podcast with literally a treasure trove of questions. I only got to half of them, but it was very entertaining, very informative. You helped with Jonathan clarify so many confusing topics, especially for people who watch this, are a lot of data people, so tends to be a little bit off the radar. So thank you so much for explaining. Would love to do this again.
Absolutely. Yeah, anytime. Looking forward to it. It's always a pleasure to spend time with you, Sanjeev. And to all the listeners, thank you all very much. And I look forward to spending more time with you in the future.
Perfect. Thank you. Take care, everyone. See you next time.
Bye-bye.